The 1998 to 2016 San Antonio Spurs are one of the greatest dynasties in NBA history. Led by players like Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and David Robinson, their sheer dominance during this stretch led to them winning 5 championships and achieving the highest NBA franchise win percentage of all time. But despite their awesomeness, one of the biggest questions fans have is why were the Spurs never able to win back-to-back championships? Today, I'll try and go in depth and look at the playoff series that prevented the Spurs from achieving that prestigious honor. In a lockout-shortened 50-game season, the Spurs captured their first title in 1999 after dismantling the Knicks in the finals. Shortly after winning the championship, key player Sean Elliott announced that he had a kidney disease and underwent kidney transplant surgery on August 16, 1999, leaving him unavailable for the first half of the season, before eventually making his return on March 14, 2000. Elliott was actually the first professional athlete to return after getting a kidney transplant. Despite Elliott's absence, the Spurs had a pretty successful regular season. Tim Duncan and David Robinson were both All-Stars, made All-NBA teams, and were arguably still the best defensive frontcourt in the league. However, on April 11, 2000, Duncan tore the lateral meniscus in his left knee in the 78th game of the season. Despite Duncan's efforts to prove he could still play, Greg Popovich was worried about making their star play on a bad leg, so he decided to let Duncan rest for the 2000 playoffs. After finishing with a 53-29 record, the Spurs' first-round opponent were the Phoenix Suns, led by Penny Hardaway and Shawn Marion. The Suns were also suffering from injuries in the series. Tom Gugliotta had ruptured ligaments in his knee late into the season, and Jason Kidd was still recovering from a broken ankle and only played in Game 4. Replacing Tim Duncan for the Spurs was Samaki Walker, and even though him and Robinson rebounded well together, Duncan's presence was sorely missed on the Spurs. The Suns won the series 3-1. In 2003, Tim Duncan was back in peak shape and led the Spurs to a 60-win regular season as well as their second championship when they defeated the New Jersey Nets in 6 games. Sean Elliott and Mario Elie had both retired in 2001, but the Spurs had made 3 big pickups in between championships: Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and Bruce Bowen. Replacing the now-retired David Robinson for the 03-04 season was the 7-foot Rasho Nesterovic. The Spurs finished the season with a 57-25 record. They swept the Grizzlies in the first round, and for the second straight year, they were facing the Lakers in the West semifinals. Before we dive into this series, let's backtrack a little to set the stage for the 2004 playoffs. The Lakers finished the 2003 season as the 5th seed in the West, and the main reason for that was because of Shaq's absence. Shaq had played through injury in the 2002 finals, and instead of getting surgery in the summer, he waited until the Lakers training camp. This led to his now infamous quote, "I got hurt on company time, so I'll rehab on company time." The West in the 2000s is arguably the strongest conference era in NBA history, especially in terms of the big men, so not having Shaq to start the year was a big problem. The Lakers gave Robert Horry the 4th most minutes played on the team, and tried using him in a more physical role, but it wore Horry down. Not to mention, by the time Shaq did come back, the beef between him and Kobe was worsening the team chemistry. In the 2003 semis, the Lakers and Spurs had tied the series 2 games apiece heading into Game 5. In the final seconds of that game, Robert Horry missed a famous game-winning 3, which gave the Spurs momentum to win Game 6 on the road. Despite starting every game of the series, Horry averaged 4.3 points, shot 26.2% from the field, and missed all 18 of his 3-point attempts. Fast forward to 2004, and the Lakers and Spurs are facing off again, this time with some new faces. The Spurs acquired Robert Horry in free agency and Hedo Turkoglu in a trade, and the Lakers had acquired Karl Malone and Gary Payton. Like in 2003, the series was tied at 2-2 heading back to San Antonio for Game 5. Through the first half and most of the third quarter, it looked like this was becoming a blowout win for the Lakers. With 5 minutes left in the third, LA led by as much as 16, but thanks to Devin Brown and the Lakers going cold, the Spurs were able to claw their way back. With the Spurs leading by 1 point in the fourth, Kobe hit a shot to put the Lakers up 72-71. With 5.4 seconds left, the Spurs inbounded the ball to Duncan. In desperate need of some points, Duncan dribbled into the defense, and with Shaq all over him, he hit an off-balanced 20-foot fadeaway. Spurs up 73-72, with 0.4 seconds left on the shot clock. After some cheeky timeouts and formation changes, the Lakers got the ball to Derek Fisher, who hit hit one of the most iconic buzzer beaters in playoff history. It seems totally improbable, but in the words of Shaq, one lucky shot deserves another. With momentum headed back to Staples Center for Game 6, the Lakers closed out the series with an 88-76 win. The Spurs out-rebounded the Lakers 49-39, but what killed them was their inefficiency. Duncan scored 20, but went 7 for 18 from the field. Tony Parker had 9 points and shot 4 for 18. Ginobili had 16 points off the bench, but he shot 5 for 13, including 0 for 5 from 3. The only Spur who had a good efficiency night was Devin Brown, with 15 points on 50% shooting, but it wasn't enough to overcome the Lakers. In 2005, the Spurs won their third NBA championship. They rolled through the West, beating the Nuggets, the Sonics, and the regular season champs Suns in 5 games, then went on to beat the defending champion Pistons in a tough 7-game series. The Spurs went 63-19 in 2006, their best regular season record of the decade. They beat the Kings in a 6-game first-round series, and then met Dirk Nowitzki and the Dallas Mavericks in the West semis. For the entire series, the Spurs decided to start Duncan at center. Game 1 was very close. Dirk put up 20 and 14, and Duncan retaliated with 31 and 13. With Ginobili smothering Jerry Stackhouse for the final play, the Spurs were able to win Game 1 87-85. But that's when the Mavs went on an absolute tear. The Spurs tried making adjustments by starting Brent Barry and Michael Finley over Ginobili and Horry, but the Mavs were able to take a 3-1 series lead. Game 3 was especially painful, as the Spurs lost 104-103 because when Duncan gave the ball to Ginobili, the ball bounced off Ginobili's leg and went out of bounds with 2 seconds left. Game 5 was super close as well, but thanks to a clutch steal from Ginobili and an even more clutch block from Bruce Bowen, the Spurs were just barely able to stave off elimination with a 98-97 win. During Game 5, a jump ball occurred where Jason Terry, Michael Finley, and Ginobili all went down to the ground. After reviewing the footage, you can just barely make out that Jason Terry punched Michael Finley while on the ground, which led to the NBA suspending Terry for Game 6. The Spurs beat the Mavs 91-86, evening the series and forcing a Game 7 back in San Antonio. With 32 seconds left in Game 7, Ginobili hit a 3 to put the Spurs up 104-101, but in one of the most infamous moments in Spurs history, Ginobili fouled Dirk on a layup the very next play, giving him the and one and sending the game into overtime. From there, Dallas center Sagana Diop held Duncan to 1 of 7 shooting, and the Mavs won the game, 119-111. In 2007, the Spurs won their 4th championship after sweeping LeBron and the Cavs in the finals. They went 56-26 in the 07-08 season, beat the Suns in the first round, defeated the Hornets in 7 games, and met the Lakers in the West Finals. This is one of the least exciting series to talk about in this video, because, simply put, Kobe was on an absolute mission in 2008, and the Lakers comfortably beat the Spurs in 5 games. Duncan had a good series, averaging 22 and 17, but Manu was playing with an ankle injury and only averaged 12.6 points on 35.8% from the field. It also didn't help that Brent Barry was now 37, Bruce Bowen was 36, and Michael Finley was 35. Several seasons went by before the Spurs made it back to the finals. They lost guys like Bowen, Barry, and Finley, but added some new ones like Danny Green, Tiago Splitter, Boris Diaw, and Kawhi Leonard. In 2013, they finished with a 58-24 record, defeated the Lakers, the Warriors, and the Grizzlies to make it out of the West. Their opponent in the finals were the Big Three Miami Heat. I'll just cut to the juicy stuff. The Spurs were up 3-2, and with 30 points from Tim Duncan in the first 3 quarters, and the Spurs leading by as many as 13 as the third was winding down, it looked like the Spurs were going to win their 5th championship. But because of some missed shots from Duncan, some missed free throws from Ginobili and Kawhi, and a 3 from LeBron, the Heat managed to stay in the game. Then, we all know what happened next. Ray Allen hit the clutchest shot of all time, sending the game into overtime and giving the Heat momentum to win Game 6 and eventually Game 7, handing the Spurs their only finals loss. Despite a 7-game scare in the first round against the Mavs, the Spurs bounced back and won the 2014 championship, while playing some of the best basketball the NBA has ever seen. The 2015 season, on the other hand, was up and down. The Spurs finished with 55 wins, but Kawhi, Parker, and Tiago Splitter were all badgered by injuries, and Duncan and Ginobili were 39 and 37. The 2014 Spurs benefited from great ball movement and 3-point shooting, but after having career years, guys like Marc Marco Bellinelli, Boris Diaw, and Patty Mills had all regressed the following year. This was also the first season Kawhi was the main focal point of the offense, but after missing the first 2 months, things really didn't start to click until the end of the season. Despite winning 55 games, the Spurs were given the 6th seed in the Western Conference. Because of seeding rules, the Blazers got the 4th seed in the West because they were first in the Northwest Division, despite having a 51-31 record. The Spurs had a chance to win a higher seed when they played their division rival the Pelicans in the last game of the regular season, but the Spurs lost 103-108, meaning they had to face the 3rd-seeded Clippers in the first round. Because of Thiago Splitter's nagging injuries, Blake Griffin feasted all series, nearly averaging a triple-double. Parker suffered an Achilles injury in Game 2, and is often the Spur who gets most of the blame for this series. He just didn't look like himself. Tim Duncan was the only real constant throughout, averaging a typical solid stat line of 17.9 points and 11.1 rebounds. The Spurs were able to take a 3-2 lead, but in Game 6, the starting lineup just couldn't get much done. Despite Bellinelli pouring in 23 points, the Clippers forced Game 7 with a 106-92 win. There was also a strange coaching decision with the game winding down. The Spurs were down by 3 with 30 seconds left, and they needed a defensive stop, but Pop chose to keep Mills and Bellinelli in the backcourt instead of Ginobili and Parker. Chris Paul then proceeded to hit a floater that pretty much iced the game. Tony Parker bounced back in Game 7 with 20 points, and Duncan himself poured in 27. With under 9 seconds left, the game was tied 109-109 when Chris Paul drove and called game.